thank you for having me. I'm sorry I speak in English. This is not one of my great fortes, learning languages. And it also was interesting to accept an invitation here today and then find out about subject matter. Suburban and transurban space. I was a little surprised and wondered how I could relate to it. It wiped out about 80% of our work. That's something I could show. But in recent years, our work has moved from maybe being very special and small scale in character to something that's much more broad in its conceptual starting point, and finds itself leaning towards urban strategies and thinking about how we place ourselves between an urban context, one which I'm particularly familiar with and happy with, and something outside that context, which seems to vary a huge amount depending on where you are in the world. So, we don't normally think about transurban open space when we land for the first time on a new site. Questions we normally ask are quite different. We say, well, how can the landscape be transformed from an industrial wasteland, an archaeological dig, an overgrazed desert, or one from the sea? And these are sort of the issues that we find ourselves dealing with. What is unique about the position of this place? What does it hold within it? And what can it connect to? How are local and not so local people going to connect? And why do we get excited by this place? What difference can we make to it? Do we have a clear brief? And more often than not, we don't. So, for us to design a landscape that sits in a position somewhere between town and country, one has to be aware of the forces that have created it and why it needs transformation. The reason why the site has become compromised by its position and the opportunities that are available to make it useful to both human and ecological contexts is really important and something we have to think about. Our projects often sit within different climate zones, geographical, physical, cultural, and historical contexts, and ones that are not familiar to us. So it's with great joy often that we find ourselves in a new place, one that we need to discover, get under the skin of, and research. And research is a really important requirement. So our aim is always to provide what is needed and appropriate, but also to challenge conventions and make a unique statement that provides a thoughtful environment for people and the places we touch. We aim to distill the soul of the place and manifest this in a physical form. So I start with a project that maybe some of you are familiar with. This is the Leicester gas fabric very near the centre of Amsterdam. It's based on, or its existence is based on the strategy of green fingers that move in from the agricultural landscape that sits outside the big city and finds its way into the heart and links to an old 19th century park. But this site had been a big industrial site where power for gas, electricity was created. Our challenge was to find a new direction for what was basically post-industrial wilderness. The city itself had already started that process. They did it slowly. They had the idea of putting their town hall district. This is the old city park, which connects with the inner ring of central Amsterdam, sorry, the outer ring of central Amsterdam. This is the Haarlem Canal that links the city to Haarlem. And these are the old gas holders and gas factory. And over time, a 10-year period, the city occupied these buildings with Amsterdam's alternative sort of cultural community, so theatre groups, people who needed cheap space. And they sat within a totally polluted site. And it was only 10 years through this process, discovering what those cultural events and activities could bring to the site, that they decided the best thing to do was to create a culture park, a park that could link with that community, but also provide local people with a place to escape the city. Get used to my buttons. So this is the site as we started work. We had to actually analyse and locate every part of the polluted ground. In Holland, you're not allowed to move it off-site, you're not allowed to pollute another place. And the whole site moved towards something very typically un-Dutch, which is an undulating landscape, where polluted soil around the buildings was relocated as earth mounds to protect the site from the railway, but also to create a planted landscape that started creating strong character areas within the site. These were all linked to the central axis, which you see here, and surrounded by water. Two features that we created, a big lake, which was totally artificial, and then on top of a polluted drainage ditch, a sequence of water landscapes that moved into a stream. Budgets were very low. We had to reuse the materials of the industrial site where we could to make ends meet money-wise. So this site has two layered activities. One is a place for people on an everyday basis to go and walk, take their children, spend a summer's day away from their homes. But then on special occasions, because of its island-like quality, they can shut the gates and have a big festival on the site. A music festival, an arts festival, anything the city needs for a particular moment in time. And so these big spaces convert from maybe holding a theatre group and an event to suddenly becoming the place for a rock concert, a 10,000 person auditorium, spaces for different activities linked to that event. People arrive by bike, park their bikes in what we call the market square, move down along the axis, which obviously enables each of the buildings to be serviced by the vehicles that bring in the events. So this is a very 21st century park. We can't, in our cities and on the edge of our cities, create spaces that are simply about landscape. They're also about other activities, activities that cities need. So these are the everyday events. The big event slate becomes the heart of the landscape, especially in summer when it becomes a town beach, but also more early in the day, late in the day, places for people to be away from their contacts, exercise, dream. The central axis, as I said, links all the buildings and services them, but of course creates the central spine on which all the landscape elements fit together. You can see here the use of the old industrial materials of the site. The only new surface we brought to the site was the central axles. Everything else was reused. In the gas holders, we placed the worst pollution, capped them with clay, and put innocent-looking water features. And likewise, the existing polluted stream is now in an underground pipe and a series of water gardens located over the top. So, in our suburban, transurban landscapes, we're creating totally artificial contexts, but ones that obviously are trying to link between the urban and the natural, but nothing's naturally involved. A very different context. We've found ourselves working all over the world and trying to understand new places which are moving in similar directions as our European cities. Looking at ways to grow, how to use sites that currently don't quite make sense, and find new uses for them. Singapore, an amazing high-rise city, is beautifully located in a tropical climate. And so this view of path beside a motorway gives you the impression of how that tropical landscape can just take hold of the context and screen you and hide the urban context from view. But this is a context that people really actually don't like very much. Local people drive to work or use rapid transit systems, find themselves in mega complexes, moving from car parks, underground facilities, into shopping centres, to their work, to their homes, never actually really having to set foot outside if they don't want. It's a very three-dimensional city. And actually, if you go to a park, there's no one in them, not during the day anyway. It's too humid, too hot. So, when you're given a project, a park, you sort of wonder partially why you're doing it. What you do have, which is absolutely wonderful, is incredible graphic forms, roof and colour. And that is actually really thrilling, coming to this landscape and seeing these amazing plants that you normally see in your homes. The context of this project is, again, about a city growing and thinking about its future. You can see here, back in the 60s, the shoreline of the city was right up against the coast. That's this edge here. Since then, they've created these huge land masses to develop and grow the city out into the ocean. And at the same time, by creating a barrage here, they're creating large freshwater reservoirs that take water from the surrounding landscape and store it in their bays. They want to be self-reliant, they don't want to be reliant on their neighbours. They started the growth of their city and leaping over the bay to this new area here by actually holding a competition for a park. And a park that actually has no real context with the city. It's really about thinking about a future high-rise city that will develop one day out in this area here. So we had to presume a great deal and come up with a strategy for how the park will generate a neighbourhood in the future. So getting excited by our leaf forms and colour, we started thinking about how to make this park usable by people every part of the day. And we did so by coming up with the idea that, first of all, we needed a spine road that would connect what is a very narrow park to an urban road system that one day would then generate a street pattern beyond the park itself. That provides entry into a series of leaf forms that sit above the general landscape as it exists at the moment. And in these leaf forms we would have car parks. And those car parks would link to a sequence of water events that we would create, and by extending this reservoir into our landscape and creating a smaller scale context along what is a 2.5 kilometre walk. Nobody walks 2.5 kilometres in Singapore as a choice. So our thought was, and what helped with the form of the park, was that because it has the curve, when you arrive in this corner or in a corner, you can never see what's beyond. It's always curving away from it. And so the water sports inlet, the Las Vegas fountain inlet with its food courts, the romantic valley with its stream garden, the town beach with its waterfall, the channel for bringing water into the reservoir, these keep entertaining you as you move through the site from one landscape to another. And by parking under the leaf forms to the rear of the park, firstly you elevate the park so you always have this visual link to the water and sea breezes. But also you can park the car and find yourself in a food court entertained by water. So this was our strategy, and very shortly after the completion of the Phase 1 project by Andrew Grant Associates on this side of the reservoir, we will be developing a more detailed landscape. The whole development of this landscape is taking us into a whole area of development that we started with down in the Royal, of creating 3D digital models. Everyone, I think, may be aware that Catherine is well known for her clay models and creating these beautifully made clay forms to generate a landscape. But when one's working on this massive scale, we've had to find new techniques. And so here, with 3D modelling used by early sketches, we can generate the forms that sit over the architectural components that make up this park. And so the leaf forms at the big scale are very graphic, but as they develop, they become water gardens, rice paddies, places that can hold people and give them context. And again, in these renderings, you can see that what could be actually a rather dramatic landscape isn't so dramatic in the Swiss context. Here you can see the undulations of landform, sometimes creating small spaces that look into the landscape from the car park environment beyond. But generally, the whole appearance is a city park. Of course, we're working in different environments, and nighttime Las Vegas spectacular is quite important in Singapore. So this is what excites people there. this is what's going to bring them to the landscape to have a walk. Another, again, really different context, a project which is still in its infancy, its very early days. It's become two projects. A new city that's developing on the edge of the Oman, Abu Dhabi border, has been an oasis for thousands of years, with a population of 1,000 to 2,000 people. There's now a population of 300,000. And there are landscapes at risk, ones that are very important to the culture and identity of the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. And the creation of a World Heritage Site in this city that will place it on the map. The first project I'll show you is for Hilli Archaeological Park here, where there's extensive Bronze, Iron Age, Islamic archaeology, with encroaching urbanization around all those edges. The other is the sun that's sort of the most iconic landscape in Abu Dhabi, which is Jebel Hafid, which is it's sort of like Ayers Rock for locals, in that there's a massive mountain that suddenly projects itself 1,800 meters, maybe feet, I get confused, above the desert plain. And it's seen miles away, it's sort of like what's like the Matterhorn. You can see it miles away as we approach this city. But it's no longer in the wilderness in which everybody imagines it. It's got shopping malls being built next to it. It's even got the idea of a ski slope running down it. Everything's possible in this place. And we've been charged with making or looking at how to make this into a national park. It's the country's first. First, Jebel Hafid. It's a very interesting story. It's one of huge pride at finding archaeology in the 60s, 70s, when this very small nation was sort of discovering itself and its importance through oil. They also, at that time, found Bronze Age tombs, Iron Age remains, that actually said, there was a context that had existed for 2,000 years, that they had a history of. And their first attempt at creating an archaeological park was this very formal Western axial Beaux-Arts landscape. Now we've come back and they have discovered that this whole site, which is sitting in a sort of valley, is actually covered with archaeological remains, most of which will remain under the ground until it becomes the right time to find out more. On the other hand, there are these very significant and important sites actually above the ground. Archaeologists have been working here for 2-3 decades. And the biggest problem we have is that much of the archaeology is actually having been discovered, is slowly blending back into the landscape. It doesn't rain much, but when it rains, these mud structures fall apart, they swell up, they dry, they crack, they no longer exist. And we've got to find a very quick way to basically help restore or rebury this material. But where we do have stone structures, actually give people an understanding of what they're about, why they existed, and why it's important to understand that context. What's very interesting is, I'll refer to it later, is this archaeological fillage. Fillage are water channels that bring or brought water into desert areas from mountains where, of course, you get rain. So, LA, as I said, has been an agricultural oasis for thousands of years. What do we look at? Topography, archaeology, how this landscape has changed over time, why obviously this edge at a higher level connects to mountains and where the water channels may have brought water into the agricultural landscape. Wind is probably the second biggest cause of problems for the archaeology. Sand-blown material pounds the archaeology and again destroys it. Sun is the biggest problem for people when they're out in these very exposed sites. How are they going to find a landscape that is sort of acceptable to walk around and be in? And as I said, these are very early sketches. They're in the process of change and flux, and they're just the first ideas we've had. Our biggest problem is that we had to take out what is actually a rather charming community park out of the centre of the site, and bring back a landscape that maybe had echoes of what had once existed in this site. So what was a Bronze Age landscape, what was an Iron Age landscape is something we're researching with archaeologists. So a piece of land that's already been badly destroyed through past efforts to bring culture and heritage to Abu Dhabi has become the focus for an entry park, so you can park your car, and locals can actually have a place for their children to play and enjoy, especially in the evenings when most people go out. But stopping people driving over this site is hugely important. The car is everything there, it's air conditioned, petrol is cheap, and they feel they have ownership of all the desert in their four-wheel drives. So we have to stop them moving into the site, and so we're creating a bus route that takes them to a new cultural centre in the centre with an Iron Age landscape and a series of Bronze Age, what we call paleo landscapes, that exist in context with some of the archaeology. So I described the open space. Again, this is changing. It won't remain like this, but there's a small entrance pavilion where people will get a sort of taste of what's on the centre of the site and move onto buses. And then this is where we're having to conjure up, currently tarmac roads right into the centre of the site. We're having to remove all of that material, having to take out a mosque, remove the dwellings that have been cropping up, of course the squatters on the site. And find acceptable methods of bringing in low-impact highways and paths so that people can move around with ease. Also understanding what a Bronze Age landscape could be. What we're finding is there's a lot of material on the seeds, the plants that were grown at that time in the archaeological archives. Trying to understand other cultures that exist currently, how in the Bronze Age they used wells this enabled field systems of only about 40 meters width, and a sequence of plants that currently can't exist in this landscape without irrigation. What we've also learnt is that there was an amazing climate change that existed between Bronze Age and Iron Age. So in the Bronze Age, you could have wells because the groundwater was high, and then there was a period when those wells dried out, and they had a sort of dark ages when it was really hard to exist. And that's what brought in the next phase of development, maybe 1,000 years later, which was the bringing in of water from the mountains, 25 kilometers under the ground, through a series of cuts in the ground that then enabled them to link water channels to the point where they arrived at the oasis in fertile ground. They used the sun to develop a system of, with the water channels moving water from one field to the next, so each family got its fair share of water. It was a very sophisticated system and took an awful lot of effort. And that allowed fruit trees, the date palm, other more exotic plants to take hold in this landscape. The whole system of how one used water was also developed, how when it arrived it was used for human consumption, then reused and reused and reused again, till it found itself in the field systems of agricultural landscape. So finally, all of this will be held within a visitor centre with galleries, a cafe, and our interpretation of an Iron Age landscape with contemporary water channels that distribute water through the new field system. The other project, very, very different, is the charismatic mountain. One of the emblems that you see in all the tourist brochures of Abu Dhabi. Again, what we have here are a series of Bronze Age tombs. This was on a major trade route, bringing copper from the mountains of Oman to the Indus Valley and the Euphrates in Iraq, from this very isolated part of the world. And so the tombs were created by the four fathers of the Bedouin, and there are hundreds along the edge of this mountain because this is a really significant object in the landscape. And this is a really interesting couple of photographs. This is the Oman side of the border. And you can almost imagine, a green shady landscape. And so, in this climate, a green landscape does exist. This is the Abu Dhabi side. They stopped moving their animals around and they just let them eat it all. So there are no plants left. But the mountain still captures rain every winter, and the rain now runs through destroyed wadis where farms have disrupted the flow of water. And in this landscape, we're having to recreate that wadi system and try and find a way to bring back that green landscape. It will take many years. But it's also an interesting education for local people. It's something that's never been done in the region before. And we're relying heavily on experts from the Robert and Kew and the National Parks of America, who obviously run very important desert parks in the States, to understand how we can bring this landscape back to life and make it look a little bit more like the Oman side. So For people, we're doing much as we are in Hilly, the other site I've just shown. Here we've got a visitor centre on the edge of the site, here. And from a visitor centre that's built on a massive earth bank, which curiously actually has been built to stop water drowning this village that's been growing along the motorway because it floods. The water is now contained in two big pockets, north and south of the landscape. And actually, when we can restore the wadi systems and remove the farms, the tracks, we will be able to actually use that natural resource to regenerate the landscape. And educate people at the same time. So this is our very simple strategy for the site. People need to know it's there, behind the earth bank. At the moment, what you see is this amazing white sand hill and the mountain beyond. And actually it's a very curious, surreal, non-landscape when you see it from the road. There's 4 kilometres between you and the hill. And it's only when you're on top of the sandbank that it suddenly reveals itself. So from the top of the sandbank, from the visitor centre, you get the view into the landscape, and then a bus out, or for the intrepid Europeans, walk out to a series of satellites which demonstrate different qualities of that landscape. The whole process of bringing it back to life is something which we're really interested in. I think it again shows you how important research is to our strategy. Understanding how, through learning from the site, learning from specialists in the field, we can bring their expertise and experiments to bring back plant life into the site, which obviously brings back wildlife. Q have identified 3 different plant habitats. We've already picked seeds from those plants we do find on the site and are generating plants in glass houses in the UK. We're understanding a digital model from satellite, how to restore the topography of the landscape. Here you can see that through the colours how actually the mountain bows out. There's this explanation for why we actually do find 2 green areas here and here. We luckily have found a British Army aerial photograph from 1968, and if you zoom in on that, you can see all the plants, trees, where they were located on the site. We obviously have a new satellite image which shows the farms, the tracks, the wadis. And so, from what is a destroyed landscape, you actually do see that lots of the wadis still hold vegetation. But in 1968, it was much more lush and much more like the Oman side. And from this information, through understanding how shade, sun moves across the site, where water moves through it, we slowly can piece together where best to plant our saplings that are growing in glass houses in London. And here we're actually developing a series of experiments to look at how much temporary irrigation we need to create this landscape. So, skipping through this very quickly, what do we provide for people? We have the 2 view corridors across a new series of landscapes, which is our entry park to the visitor centre. A visitor centre that has small buildings located under a large canopy in which there are exhibitions, cafes, but basically it becomes a climatisation zone for moving into the desert and the balcony view of the landscape. Then, within the landscape, a sequence of small satellite buildings which are out of view of the important remains, hold toilets, shade, and more explanation. And enable people to actually visit this landscape in a relatively easy way. It's always going to be difficult. But it enables the town to understand its context also. And finally, back to Europe, and sites that keep coming our way as possible projects. Our latest scheme for a new park in Valencia, which brings us almost back in full circle to the Vesta gas fabric, and why old industrial sites are important to the growth of cities, and why they see landscape as their future. It's a view of a city growing up around an old industrial area, which concludes my talk. Thank you.